Good day, Centralino registered nurses. We are now continuing our discussion on the drugs affecting pregnancy and lactation. Now, with the previous discussion, as we review the topics that were discussed in the last meeting, we have the discussion still related on the drugs that can support problem with pregnancy and specifically on the minor discomforts. We have already discussed the pregnancy risk categories pertaining to the drugs, and we have already applied this when we have done when we have done the discussion of the drugs that are related to the minor discomforts. And as a continuation, we are now having discussion on the drugs related to situation and pregnancy and hypertension. So actually, hypertension are being experienced by clients, specifically as reported in the statistics that the incidences that pregnant clients experiences hypertension to almost 10 to 20%. And if we are going to define gestational hypertension from the term itself, gestational, that's referring to pregnancy, and hypertension is referring simply as elevated blood pressure. So to clearly define what gestational hypertension is from the hypertension, elevated blood pressure, and when it comes to gestational age and period, we're considering after 20 gestational age, which if we will try to compute this 20 gestational weeks, it is almost equivalent to 5 months, and it already covered the second uh, trimester, second trimester. And the gestational hypertension, if clients are monitored and seemingly the obstetrician observed the pattern of the blood pressure to be elevated, the client will be subject for urinalysis to check there is tracing of protein. If there's elevation of the blood pressure of clients after 20 weeks or after 20 gestational weeks, but no tracing of protein in the urine, then that is gestational hypertension. How we may differentiate it with uh, preeclampsia. With preeclampsia, there's elevation of blood pressure with the same consideration after 20 gestational weeks, but it has already findings on tracing of protein in the urine. So that is preeclampsia. Gestational hypertension and preeclampsia both have elevated blood pressure. Gestational hypertension, preeclampsia, both consider occurrence during after 20 gestational weeks. The difference of gestational hypertension from the preeclampsia, gestational hypertension has no tracing of protein or proteinuria, while in preeclampsia, we have tracing of urine or it has proteinuria. And it is reported that for gestational hypertension, hypertensive episodes have been reported on about 10 rather to 20%. While on episodes of preeclampsia, it was reported on its incident rate of 5 to 8%. You may encounter that some terms sometimes being used as pregnancy-induced hypertension. So again, we are not anymore using the pregnancy-induced hypertension. Instead, it is gestational hypertension. Now, when it comes to the specific discussion on preeclampsia and eclampsia, so we have already discussed gestational hypertension. However, the two categories that have been identified in gestational hypertension is preeclampsia and eclampsia. When it comes to preeclampsia and eclampsia, the difference of preeclampsia to eclampsia is that of preeclampsia are still subcategorized with mild to severe, and eclampsia alone is identified already with grand mal seizure. So that's the difference between preeclampsia and eclampsia. Preeclampsia and eclampsia have both described with elevated blood pressure. However, when it comes to eclampsia, it already identified that there's elevation of blood pressure and has grand mal seizure already. So let us now proceed on the difference between mild preeclampsia and severe preeclampsia. So actually, when we're considering hypertension for mild preeclampsia, the blood pressure is above 150 systolic or above 90 diastolic. So just remember, above 140 uh, systolic and above 90 diastolic. However, but when it comes to a point that a client already uh, reached to a point that there's already blood pressure that reached almost 160 or below, that had been identified twice, okay, twice in at least 4 to 6 hours within 1 week. So to give us the idea, the client may be considered as having gestational hypertension or mild if client's blood pressure have already patterned with above 140 systolic and 90 above diastolic. And considering that if the client reaches systolic of 160 or below, and it has been recorded that it could be twice, and an interval could be 4 to 6 hours in almost 1 week, the client is already experiencing preeclampsia. Now, the difference between the severe preeclampsia is still with the reference of the blood pressure. If again, if it is still 160 below twice, 4 to 6 hours apart, 1 week, that's mild. But if it is already above, okay, above 160, 110, and two occasions apart, okay, two occasions apart, at least 6 hours apart, and the client is not engaged into physical activities, the client is on rest, the client is having severe preeclampsia. So again, let's simplify the difference of the two. Mild preeclampsia is 140 above systolic, 90 above diastolic, but there could be chances that the client may reach 160 systolic below, but recorded twice with 4 to 6 hours apart within 1 week. While severe could already be identified if it is already 160 over 110 above on two occasions at least 6 hours apart, then the patient is not engaged in physical activity, the patient is on bed rest, then that is already severe preeclampsia. Now, when we will say and we will identify that the client is already on the level of eclampsia, the client could be already identified with eclampsia if on situations that identified client has signs and symptoms of mild or severe preeclampsia. With these manifestations, the one that could be significant and different from the mild and severe preeclampsia is the presence of grand mal seizure. The next question is that of, do preeclampsia, mild, severe, and eclampsia may have tracing of protein? Yes. Again, we identified preeclampsia already if there is a tracing of protein in the urine. If ever the client has no tracing in the urine, has no proteinuria, that is only gestational hypertension. But if we will try to refer with the results of the blood pressure, then that may identify the client, and if ever even the proteinuria that been identified, but the patient already experiences grand mal seizure, then that is already eclampsia. Now, on the on the situation on what are drugs that have been identified for the severe preeclampsia. the drug of choice is magnesium sulfate. So you have heard about magnesium sulfate in our previous discussion. And magnesium sulfate is considered as calcium antagonist. So the antagonists have been used because this is to support the and prevent the transfer of the the calcium, because the calcium may specifically induce hypertension. So the therapeutic level of magnesium sulfate is 4 to 7 milliequivalent per liter. However, magnesium sulfate is identified and categorized as category D. So what do you mean by category D? So by category D, it identified already some studies that may significantly affect the what? Significantly affect the mother and the fetus. Now, what are the uses and contraindications? So obviously, magnesium sulfate have been used for severe preeclampsia. It is basically contraindicated with myasthenia gravis. So myasthenia gravis is a severe nerve condition which specifically may cause chances of paralysis. So be careful when it comes to the administration of the magnesium sulfate. So what is relevant prior to the administration of magnesium sulfate is to check the deep tendon reflexes. And if ever there are chances that you have administered magnesium sulfate and there are manifestations that are not expected as side effects, then we need to stand by the drug, which is calcium gluconate. Okay, calcium gluconate. So IV. So but seemingly when there are already toxic level that have been identified, okay, that have been identified uh 2 hours prior to delivery. So calcium gluconate may not be recommended due to its effect to the fetus. So usually the magnesium sulfate is uh the is basically is basically a drug that are categorized as D, and the nurse must monitor for the signs of maternal respiratory depression. Why? Because since therapeutic level is 4 to 6 milliequivalent per liter, then if the serum level already reaches 10 to 15 milliequivalent per liter, then you must check the respiratory rate and the status of the respiration of the pregnant mother, because chances client could be high risk for respiratory arrest. Now, if the level findings of the serum level of magnesium sulfate will have above 20 to 25 milliequivalent per liter. So the organ that could be affected is the heart. So basically, it may affect or it may cause cardiac arrest. So take into consideration the therapeutic level. Therapeutic level is 4 to 6 milliequivalent per liter, and chances that once it reach above 10 to 15, respiratory depression or possibly respiratory arrest, and if the serum level is about 20 to 25 milliequivalent per liter, it's already cardiac arrest. So it means that when it reaches 10 already, it is already identified nurses to be on alert mode, because this is already identified as toxic level and calcium gluconate must be prepared. So, and as I mentioned, deep tendon reflexes must be must be examined prior to its administration. Other than with the magnesium sulfate, hydralazine hydrochloride, okay, are identified to also manage preeclampsia, because hypertension usually occurs because of the what? Because of the resistance in the artery. So if there is already resistance, it may elevate the blood pressure. So what will be the action of the hydralazine? The hydralazine, since it causes resistance through because of the arteriolar or artery resistance, then it will cause its vasodilation. So the purpose of the hydralazine hydrochloride is to maintain that if the diastolic of the diastolic pressure of at least 90 to 110 millimeters mercury, usually it may not be given to patient with diastolic that is actually more than okay more than 105 millimeters mercury, because to the extent that it may significantly cause a sudden shoot in the blood pressure eventually, or possibly it may cause a sudden drop of the diastolic pressure. So again, remember this is not given to pre-eclamptic, because again, it is indicated hydralazine hydrochloride for severe pre-eclampsia. Now, another is we have methyl dopa. So methyl dopa, during the time that we have the discussion on the asynchronous mode on the methyl dopa is considered as an antihypertensive drug, if you remember that. So the action of the methyldopa is considered as category B. So why it is category B? It is identified that it is safe for mother and fetus. However, studies are not sufficient. So unlike the category A. So if we will try to consider the safety, safe administration of the drug, and since magnesium sulfate is identified as category D, so it may not be the safest drug. Category C, okay, category C is obviously it may have studies that really affects the fetus, and methyldopa is category B. So uh, possibly if you are a nurse, you by these pregnancy risk categories of drugs, the most safest could be, as based from the pregnancy risk categories of drugs, is methyldopa. Now, other than with this, usually the methyldopa may significantly decrease sympathetic outflow to the heart. So we all know that if sympathetic nervous system is is being stimulated, the forceful contraction of the heart increases its workload. So it usually stabilizes the blood pressure. You must take into to caution, okay, to caution that sedation is usually transient. So remember that. When the client is on this under this drug, you must take into caution on the sedation. Now, when talking about the next drug, which is the fourth for the preeclampsia, is labetalol. So the term itself, labetalol drug, ends the drug that ends in lol. Okay, if the drugs end in lol, so obviously these are beta blocker. Okay, for the beta blocker, usually if it acts about and if it acts to the heart, we are talking about the receptor of beta 2. If we're talking about the beta 2 for the heart, the action is to what? To stabilize the workload of the heart by slowing its contraction. So, but the adverse effects must be taken into consideration, such as orthostatic hypotension, dizziness. Remember when we discussed the beta blockers in the cardiovascular drugs, usually one of the adverse reaction for beta blockers is orthostatic hypotension. So that's why better when the client is taking beta blockers, similar or the same with those who may have severe preeclampsia, you must advise the client to have first bed rest. Okay, and with such bed rest, because sudden change in the position may cause sudden drop of the blood pressure. So that's what we call orthostatic hypertension. So labetalol is category C. So if you will, we have identified the four drugs that have been considered as a management for severe preeclampsia. is we have the magnesium sulfate, which is categorized as category D. So uh, we have identified also a drug which is basically on hydralazine hydrochloride, which is category C. So, and we have methyl dopa as category B, and we have the labetalol as category C. So if we will try to identify, if we will ask the nurse, when it comes to the drug literature, methyl dopa is the most safest. Then if methyl dopa can be prescribed by the doctor, the nurse must be aware on the next, which is the category C, on the what? Labetalol, and the other one is we have the hydralazine hydrochloride. And the last option could be magnesium sulfate. Now, next is most of the clients that you will monitor and subject for the normal spontaneous delivery is obviously they will undergo the labor. Okay. When the client is engaged or experiencing labor pains, there are to drugs that are considered for pain control during labor analgesia, because eventually if the client cannot tolerate any more pain, uh the point or the principle is that of the client could be subject for non-pharmacologic management. Okay, the what will be that will be the initial role of the nurse. And if ever the pain is not anymore tolerable, it is much better to uh, manage pain without loss of consciousness. Why? Because when we are monitoring, we're going to monitor the client in labor. It is very important for the client to be more conscious so that to verbalize severity of pain. Because the severity of pain could give us the idea on the progress of labor. So the two terms have been identified in the pain control. We have sedation and we have anesthesia. Okay. So what's the difference of sedation and anesthesia? If we have sedation, the state may cause just a diminish of mental and physical responsiveness. So what do you mean by that? The state is you may not be totally, okay, you may not totally experience loss of consciousness, because it's very important for the uh, labor pain management that the client can still verbalize the and describe the labor pains accordingly. So it may just diminish mental and physical responsiveness without loss of consciousness. While in anesthesia, there could be loss of painful sensations with or without loss of consciousness. So, example, the client could be sedated because of because of untolerated labor pains. So it can manage the pain. However, it may just it may not lose the consciousness, but it may just diminish the mental and physical responsiveness, because the client could experience dizziness, just dizziness, but still the client could be aware of her environment. While anesthesia is there could be a loss of pain sensation, either localized, but or it could be general, loss of pain sensation, but it could not be considered as either total loss of consciousness. It could be also without loss of consciousness. because when the client will be subject for full dilation and any time for delivery, the client must be conscious in terms of the what? In terms of the participation of her participation when it comes to bearing down. Because if the client will not do the bearing down, it may not have an effective continuous delivery of the baby. So it may be very hard to instruct a client who's having normal spontaneous delivery who is unconscious or who is definitely not responsive, because there could be possibility that uterine contraction could be identified, but the client's bearing down could not be effective. So that also matters. So again, what's the difference? The sedation will just diminish the mental and physical responsiveness. The anesthesia may cause loss of painful sensation, but with or without loss of consciousness. Kasi for example, if the client will be and the client will be subject for spinal anesthesia. Usually, spinal anesthesia has the loss of pain sensation if it is abdominal part below. Okay, abdominal part below. So that's why there could be a possibility. There could be a possibility that when the client will be subject for episiotomy, she may not what? She may not feel the sensation. Okay, but since the client did not lose her consciousness, the client can still have some uh uh can may still feel the uterine contractions, and that will give her the idea to do the continuous bearing down for almost 10 seconds. Now next, when we talk about when we talk about the drugs for pain control during labor, analgesia, labor, we are talking about analgesia and sedation. So the first is we are talking about sedative tranquilizer drugs. So kaya that's why if you will uh, heard about tranquilizer, it always it is always identified for pain relief. And again, when we talk about sedation, going back to our definition, it is just only consider a diminish of physical and mental, but still, again, without loss of consciousness. These are usually given sedative tranquilizer drug. These are usually given during the latent labor, okay, the latent labor. So almost going uh, to early phase of the labor, and usually if there is already ruptured of membrane. Okay, because once there will be ruptured of membranes, the progress of labor is very fast. And if the progress of labor will be fast, the chances that it may possibly lead to a progressive labor pain. So sedative tranquilizer could be an alternative for latent and if with ruptured membranes. However, these drugs, the secobarbital, okay, from the term itself, barbital, kasi if we talk about barbital, ayan, this is used to decrease anxiety during latent phase of labor. Okay? So, but if it, even though it is given, okay, even though if it is given to the client, because it's only sedation, it may just diminish the physical responsiveness and it may diminish the mental responsiveness, but it may not cause a direct effect on the uterine contraction. So the client may still feel the progress of labor through its uterine contraction. However, this is category D. Okay, this is category D, which may affect the fetus and the mother. So that's why it is very important for the nurse to monitor the progress of labor of the maternal well-being, and monitor the continuous fetal heart rate or fetal heart tone for the monitoring of the fetal well-being. Because we all know for a fact that if it is category D and given the client with the sedative tranquilizers, this may have an effect for the both. Next is we have the pentobarbital. Okay, pentobarbital. So, pentobarbital is short-acting barbiturates. Although if we're talking about barbiturates, again, it's sedative effect. It has a sedative effect. And this is usually given for latent phase of labor. So just the same as for the the first drug, okay, as we have mentioned, the first drug, which is the secobarbital, it is just the same. It is given during the latent phase of labor, and same as pentobarbital. These are given also on the latent phase, but it has a short-acting effect. So that's the difference between the seco. Okay, the difference between the seco barbital, this could be long-acting, but on the perspective of pentobarbital, it is short-acting. So try to take into consideration the difference of the two. The next drug, which is a sedative tranquilizer drug, is promethazine. Okay, promethazine is a combination of antihistamine and antiemetics. Okay, remember, di ba, we always, during the minor discomforts that the client experience is histamine 1, di ba? Histamine 1 is one receptor that is uh, basically identified with minor discomforts of pregnancy. And if we are considering this as antiemetics, okay, antiemetics, this also, from the term itself, emesis, it's on the vomiting. So promethazine as an antihistamine are given as sedative tranquilizer drug. And you must take into consideration that this must not be given subcutaneously. Why? Because chances that if it is given subcutaneously, it may cause tissue damage. So it is advisable that it should be given on a Z-track method. And from the secobarbital, okay, secobarbital, it is categorized as what? As we mentioned, secobarbital is categorized as category D. Pentobarbital is categorized as category D. Promethazine is category C. So, ibig sabihin, if the client may have sedative, it may have the sedation category C, it is proven that it may have an effect on the fetus as based from the studies. Now, other than the sedative tranquilizer drug as category C, we could give hydroxyzine. So hydroxyzine has this, it contradicts again the histamine effect, and usually anxiolytic. This is anxiolytic, so anti-anxiety and anti-emetic also as well. So when you are about to identify situations like the client has already ruptured the membrane, okay, and the client is on the latent phase of labor, so start first with category C. So you may take hydroxyzine, okay, hydroxyzine, and the other one is promethazine. So zine, di ba? Zine. So you are having this idea that it is in category C. But it leaded, once it is category D, so get away muna from the drugs ending in barbital. So that is the main idea for you to be guided accordingly. So next, when we talk about the sedative tranquilizer, so if we say sedative tranquilizer, usually once the client may have sedation, that's why it causes a diminished mental and physical responses, because usually pag sedation, it may affect specifically, or it is the effect is directly to control the pain receptor directly to the central nervous system, which is the pain. Now, when we talk about narcotic agonists, okay, narcotic agonists could could be different from the sedative tranquilizers. Kasi usually sedative tranquilizers are focused on the histamine, emesis, anti-emesis, and anti-anxiety. While we're considering narcotic agonists, from the term itself narcotic, it's still the same. It has a direct effect on the brain. Any drug, sedative, narcotic, these are usual drugs that are identified direct to the central nervous system, it may cause the possibility of diminished mental responses. So that's why most of the client who may receive these drugs for pain control are dizzy or may experience dizziness. Now, what are those examples? So for the narcotic agonists, we have the fentanyl citrate. Okay, the fentanyl citrate, these are still given during labor. However, these may provide mild to moderate sedation. Okay. Although when it comes to the sedative tranquilizer, it did not identify the level of sedation, but more when you are giving narcotic agonists, you will be knowledgeable on the level of sedation that the client may experience. So still on the management of the pain during labor, but it may give the client an mild to moderate sedation. Kung if it is moderate sedation, so it may cause diminished responsive compared to the sedative tranquilizer. So again, fentanyl citrate is contraindicated with severe asthma because usually since the drug is directly has an effect to the central nervous system. So the respiratory center can be affected and chances may affect the relaxation of the bronchial smooth muscles and eventually may affect the respiration. So another is we have the morphine sulfate. Okay, for morphine sulfate, it's a narcotic agonist. It is also category C. Okay. But the difference is that of if we were considering narcotic agonist for mild to moderate is fentanyl citrate. But if it is already the pain level during labor is moderate to severe. Okay, moderate to severe. Pero as much as possible, as I've told you, if it could be relieved, it could have a relief of non-pharmacologic management, and that could be the essence of the presence of the nurse. It chances the client cannot anymore tolerate, then it comes to sedative tranquilizer or either the narcotic agonist. However, this could have an effect to the fetus. Okay, if it is cause sedation to the mother, so chances may cause sedation also or diminished response of the baby when it is delivered in the extrauterine line. So that's why it is opiate opioid, so direct to the brain. So if we're considering moderate to severe, morphine sulfate. If it is mild to moderate, it's fentanyl citrate. If it causes a problem with the respiratory suppression, then remember the antidote naloxone hydrochloride. So that's why for magnesium sulfate, it's calcium gluconate. If we are talking about morphine sulfate, the antidote is naloxone hydrochloride. Now, other drugs that could be used for mixed narcotic agonist antagonist. So it means that sedative tranquilizers. So we have identified sedative tranquilizers. We have identified the narcotic agonist. So if we say agonist, it causes the narcotic effect. Then if we are talking about mixed narcotic agonist and antagonist, so these are drugs which may have the opioid agonist and antagonist so that this may this may cause the direct effect to the fetus. So if you've heard the mixed narcotic agonist, since it is category C, it may lower the risk or chances that may affect the effect. Okay, that's why it may have opioid agonist or okay, it may have the sedation if it is category C and may cause an effect to the baby. Then it may also have the counteraction of the drug because of the antagonist. So usually the butorphanol tartarate as category C is used for moderate to severe pain. Use in pregnancy, again use in pregnancy above 37 weeks. So again, ruptured membrane, latent phase, above 37 weeks, then we may have the butorphanol tartarate. But remember, there must be no fetal distress. And fetal distress could be detected if the fetal heart rate, okay, if the fetal heart rate is above what? It's above as expected. Kasi if for example, if it may reach the fetal heart tone to almost 140, 150, 160, then these are indication that the client is having fetal distress. So next is we have nalbuphine hydrochloride. So this is the most common drug because I have even encountered this during my practice in the delivery room complex, specifically also in the labor room. Nalbuphine hydrochloride or the brand name Nubain is the most common mixed narcotic agonist that had been used for control of the labor pain. But again, since it may have the narcotic effect, this may cause the possibility of what? This may cause the possibility that may cause sedation again to the baby. So that's why it's very important for the nurse to do the tactile stimulation after the once delivered normally or in the extrauterine life, but also take into consideration again some of the antidotes, the naloxone hydrochloride, because again most of these drugs, sedative drugs, narcotic drugs, may cause the specific problem with respiratory suppression. So it is category B. So among the mixed narcotic drugs, if you will notice, if you will notice, nalbuphine hydrochloride is category B. So probably if you will be asked to a more manageable drug that could be given among the drugs, this is the only category B from the sedative tranquilizers, from the narcotic agonists, from the mixed narcotic agonists. Nalbuphine has the category B. So expect that most of the obstetricians may use the category B. So now we'll proceed to the self-assessment exercises. For the self-assessment exercises, these are the questions. A patient with severe preeclampsia is on magnesium sulfate. The laboratory report shows a magnesium sulfate of 7 milli equivalent per liter. Which of these is the most appropriate initial nursing intervention? So we may have continue to monitor the patient because this level is therapeutic. Next, we may contact the healthcare provider and report the level. Letter C, it may prepare to administer 1 gram of calcium gluconate. And letter D is turn the patient on her left side and administer 10 liters of oxygen by nasal cannula. So what is significant in the question is that of we have uh, the level of serum magnesium sulfate. So it's 7 milli equivalent per liter. So let us reveal the answer. So the answer is continue to monitor the patient because this level is therapeutic. So remember, if you remember the therapeutic level, it's 4 to 7, right? Di ba? It's 4 to 7 milli equivalent per liter. And for the magnesium sulfate, if you can still remember, if it is on the level of 10 to 15, it may cause what? Respiratory depression. And if it is 20 to 25, it may cause cardiac arrest. Yan. So very, very significant yan. So you may not contact the healthcare provider because it's normal. You may not prepare calcium gluconate because it's not on a toxic level. And you may not have a change in position because it is still normal. Normal meaning on the therapeutic level. Next question. We have the nurse assessing a patient in preterm labor. So if you can still remember the preterm labor, so what period is basically identified in the preterm labor? Who is receiving magnesium sulfate? What is the finding of most concern? Ibig sabihin, the what could be the situation that the nurse could be alarmed or on alert mode? Is it lethargy? If we say lethargy, there is a diminished level of consciousness. So client could be dizzy. So the client may feel warm. Letter C, there is a loss of patellar reflexes. And letter D, uh, positive clonus plus 2 bilaterally. So ibig sabihin the positive clonus, these are reflexes. Okay, these are reflexes and bilaterally is both. So what is the finding of most concern? So the answer is what? Answer is letter C. Why? Because loss of patellar reflexes is a sign that it may already risk for its toxicity. And remember, uh, deep tendon reflexes, okay, deep tendon reflexes that could be done on the patellar area and the it may cause also the motor response when we are doing the deep tendon reflexes. So that's the one. Next question. Next question is related to the patient has been receiving magnesium sulfate IV for 24 hours to treat severe preeclampsia. On assessment, the nurse finds temperature of 37.3, pulse of 88, respiration of 14, blood pressure of 138 over 76, 21 patellar reflexes, and negative ankle clonus. What is the priority nursing intervention? So let's have the choices. Obtain a STAT. STAT meaning immediate magnesium sulfate level to check the level of serum magnesium sulfate. Discontinue magnesium sulfate. Letter C, contact the healthcare provider. Or letter D, what? Continue to monitor the patient. So let us reveal the answer. So the answer is continue to monitor the patient. Why? Because if you will check the vital signs of the client is still having normal what? It's still having the normal temperature, pulse, and even respiration. The blood pressure, okay, remember, the blood pressure when we talk about preeclampsia, di ba? Usually the preeclampsia is having above 140 and above 90 diastolic pressure, and usually it's below 160. And if it is on severe preeclampsia, it is above 160 and 110. So if you will notice, the blood pressure is 158 over 76. So you will just continue to monitor the patient. Next question. Next question is referring to a young adolescent, gravida 1, para 0. Okay? Is admitted to labor and delivery with preterm labor at 29 weeks gestation. Which nursing intervention should the nurse include? So select all that apply. So these are the some mechanisms when you may encounter when you are taking examinations abroad, specifically with the NCLEX. So let us show the choices. Administration of antenatal glucocorticoids. So from glucocorticoids are referring to steroids, okay? Liver function test. So preterm labor ito ha. So bed rest on the left lateral position. So next, we have the letter D, administration of bolus intravenous fluids. So next, letter E, we have administration of tocolytics. And letter F is administration of anti-hypertensive. So let us reveal the answers. Which of the following should apply? So what had been identified are the following. So can we still have the answers pa? Which should be applied? Okay. So next. Okay. And we have oh, okay. So if you will notice with this setup, with this setting, the four that had been identified that is applicable to clients with preterm labor is to administer antenatal glucocorticoids. Remember that, di ba, when the client is on preterm labor and chances that could be at risk of the preterm delivery, the client could be on a corticosteroid therapy. And the purpose of the corticosteroid therapy is to support the release of the surfactant to help the fetus to what? To help the fetus be assisted upon extrauterine life on the respiration. Bed rest on the left lateral position could be applicable because this may specifically uh, promote circulation. Letter D, administration of the bolus kasi when it comes to why left lateral position because this may promote the circulation and good effect for the maternal and the fetal. Administration of bolus intravenous fluids because as per preterm labor, we need to have hydration of fluids. Okay, hydration rather through the fluids And obviously, since this is a preterm labor, tocolytics, this is to interrupt or to delay, inhibit further uterine contraction. So I think I may end up to this topic because probably I may have the second part, which is the part two of steroid drugs and pregnancy and lactation. So thank you very much.